Since you're viewing this video, you must have found this firmware upgrade page, and on this page you can download sensor micro firmware, and you can find the upgrade utility as well. So here it is. I've downloaded the firmware. I've saved the time of doing it. If you double click on the zip file, you get a folder, and inside this folder is a sensor firmware. I've already extracted that, and it's sitting on my desktop, so there it is. So when I go into this folder, I see the different versions of the firmware that I can put into the IOLab system, and I have a note thing here that tells me what the different versions of the firmware do. So I'm not going to read it right now. I'm just going to select the biggest one I have here, the latest version, hexadecimal 123, which has all kinds of features that you can read about. Okay, so let's chase that away. In order to upgrade this thing, there's a few things we need to do first. First, we need to check the batteries on the IOLab. So I'm just going to run the IOLab application first of all, and I can see that the battery voltage is 3 volts. And in fact, I can ask this thing what my sensor firmware version is, and I see that it's right now hexadecimal 110. Okay, and I wanted this to be 123, so we need to update it. All right, so we're going to close this application. Closing that application turns off my IOLab, so I got to turn it back on again. I just did that by pushing the button. Now I'm going to just run the upgrade utility. There it is. So the first thing I'm going to do up here is select sensor, because I'm reprogramming this sensor microcontroller inside the remote. Then I'm going to say open. That establishes the connection between this application and the device. Then I'm going to select the file, and so I have to go in there. And let's see now, this thing is on my desktop, and it is here, and this is the one I want, the very latest one. So I select that one, I say open, there we go, and now I just say start upgrade. Now this takes about 5 minutes, so we're going to do some time travel and get to the end of this thing. Okay, so we're done with the reprogramming, and we close the reprogramming application, but we're not quite done. We have to restart the microcontroller that's in the IOLab. So we take the screw out of the battery compartment door. I'm doing it now. We take the battery out, we stick the battery back in, and that restarts the microcontroller, taking the battery out and putting it back in. So now let's run the IOLab application. Here we go. And the dongle is still plugged in. Now when we turn on our remote, we see that it's there. And now when we say about IOLab, we see that we have an upgraded firmware version, version 1.23 or 123 hexadecimal. Okay, so at this point, the IOLab application will run just fine, but it won't be aware of the new configurations that we added. So we have to do one more little step. We have to take these new configuration files that go along with the firmware version, and we need to put them into the application. So the application itself is just a folder. On Windows, it's a folder that you can just click into very easily. On the Macintosh, it looks like an icon, but if you right-click on it, you can look at the contents, and it will be the same as this. And inside the application folder, either way, there's a resources folder, which you'll click on. There's an app folder, and then there's a client folder. So way down deep inside this client folder, there's a configuration file that tells the application what configurations the firmware has. So we have to replace that one with this new one. So I'm just going to take this one right here. I'm going to drag it over here. I'm going to make a copy. Okay, this is the one I want to use. It has to have this same name though. So I'm going to rename this one. Just call it .old or something like that. And I'm just going to copy the first part of this name right here, and yeah, I'm going to change that to old, and then I'm going to rename this one so that it has that same number in front of it. So now this file here has the same name as this configuration file used to have, but it's the new one. That's the one that we want. So that's all I need to do. Now I can just get out of this thing, and I can run the application. There we go. Application is running. And now we can see that we have the new firmware, because the new firmware has this fancy mode where it can sample A7 at 4.8 kilohertz, or if you select more than one analog input, it will still sample them rather quickly. Okay, and so this is a new version of the firmware. We're running it, runs like a charm.